You're listening to The John Hammer Show, thoughts and discussions from a preacher, disciple of Jesus, author, poet, and pastor. Brought to you by the Sunrise Podcast Network. For more information about Sunrise and or the Sunrise Podcast Network, check out isunrise.org. This podcast is also sponsored in part by Seattle Bible College. For more information about the school, check out seattlebiblecollege.edu.
Well, this is welcome all our listeners. Excited to have a dear friend and mentor in my life, Bishop Joseph Mattera. He's just written a new book that we'll talk about a little bit today, but I think I've known Joe for, it's been over 5 years, but he's been a real tremendous blessing in my life and been a part of some of the networks that he runs and some of the learning communities, the dialogical learning communities that he leads, and he's added a lot of value to my life, so I'm excited to have him on the podcast today. And how you doing, Joe? How's it being out here in the Northwest again?
Oh, wow, it's great. I love being here. I love our friendship, and I love seeing what God is doing through Sunrise Church. It's quite amazing.
Yeah. Well, it's always good to have you. You always strengthen our church, our leaders, our young leaders. You seem to have a real draw in this season of your life to pouring into younger leaders. And I know I benefit from it, so I'm thankful. But I know there's a lot of other young leaders that have really gleaned a lot from your mentoring and teaching and encouragement. And it sounds like we also share that we're practicing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Of course, you've done all sorts of martial arts throughout the years, right? But this is a new one for you.
Yep. Yeah, it's a new. I love training in different styles, so this is the first time I'm doing Brazilian, and it's been a lot of fun. I love it.
Yeah. So do you think that helps cultivate the warrior mentality? Is that one of the reasons you like training so much, or?
I guess I always loved the combat arts.
Yeah.
I always had a draw to that. I love mixing it up in a dojo.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a lot of fun. And I also like the fact that we can use it in emergency situations to protect people or to defend ourselves if we ever had to do that. So it's very, very practical, but it's a mental and psychological challenge. I love it because it challenges yourself to go to new heights.
Mm-hmm.
You have to be in shape. You have to be flexible.
Yeah.
And at my age, it forces me to stay in shape, which probably the biggest reason why I like doing it is for that reason.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, I've learned a lot of lessons through it too. Because you really have to learn through failure and learn persistence because you start at the bottom, and they're the only, so you got to learn from people better than you, and you got to take feedback. So it really. Constructive criticism, you need it daily to grow, so it really kind of deals with a lot of areas of development: physical, mental, emotional, even perseverance. So yeah, it's a lot of fun. So I know you've written a lot of books, and I've read most of them, but I've not got to read the new one quite yet. I know it just released a couple weeks ago, and it's The Purpose, Power, and Process of Prophetic Ministry. So why did you even decide to write this one in the first place?
Well, it was on my bucket list of books I knew I was supposed to write for the last 3 years.
So you have a bucket list for books? That's great.
I have, a lot of books in idea form that I haven't released yet, and this is one of them. And I got a strong sense in my spirit in January of 2021 that I was supposed to write it that time, right then. And I took a week off and wrote the book, but I already had a lot of notes compiled and a lot of different things I was working on. So I didn't start from scratch. That's why I was able to do it in 1 week. And I think it's a very, very important contribution to the discussion of the prophetic that we need today.
Mm-hmm. Wow. So you wrote it in a week. That is pretty quick. And what is like what's the overview of the book?
Well, the goal of the book is to inspire people to operate in the prophetic. And the other objective is to put out the guardrails that are needed for the prophetic to flourish And that's what we see in Paul's writings in 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, 17 to 19. He talks about not quenching the spirit, but testing all things, holding on to the good. But we see the balance there of testing or holding things accountable that are spoken, but not quenching the spirit. And oftentimes, especially the prophetic mess we've seen the last year and a half, a lot of pastors will shy away from allowing the prophetic to operate in the church, and that's what Paul was warning against. Do not quench the spirit. So this book is replete with dozens of personal stories of the power of prophecy, of true prophecy. I believe it's the greatest gift in the church to edify the body. And because it has the greatest potential, it could also be the greatest curse if it doesn't have the proper guidelines. And so that's the objective of the book, to have a strong protocol or a guardrail so that it can flow without unnecessary problems. I think the book accomplishes that.
Yeah, so you're really trying to embrace both the encourage prophecy, don't despise it. We need this gift. It's powerful, but also we need guardrails. And it seems like for some reason, a lot of the things that I've observed, that people think that you're either like, on this prophetic train, and there's like nothing that the prophets do could ever be wrong, and we just need to like almost blindly believe everything somebody prophesies to us. Or then other people are just like, I'm done with this, it's over. And so you're really calling it in a sense, you're calling for a balance.
Oh yeah, definitely. And we even get into how to develop a healthy prophetic culture in the church, how to have a balanced prophetic perspective. That's all in the book.
Yeah.
And another chapter deals with why the prophets missed it in 2020. Gives us a lot of biblical insights as to what happened and how we don't need to repeat the same mistakes.
Yeah. Do you feel like, you traveled and ministered as a prophetic minister. Was that your primary function and gift for one season of your life, you would say, or just a part of it?
Yeah. According to our maturity level, your fivefold ministry function can definitely shift. For example, Paul didn't start off as an apostle. We know he was saved about 13 or 15 years before he was sent out apostolically in Acts chapter 13. Most likely he started as an evangelist. It tells us in Acts 9 that he immediately began to refute the Jews, proving that Jesus was the Christ. So that was more apologetics, evangelism. And then we also see he operated as a prophet in parts of Scripture. And with me, as a new Christian, I started preaching on the New York City subway trains, then the Staten Island ferry to thousands of people 3 nights a week. I didn't know enough to be a teacher, but what I had, I could give. So I was able to give my testimony. I functioned as an evangelist. I saw hundreds and even thousands of people come to Christ the first 3 to 4 years I was saved, doing numerous street meetings and preaching in every kind of venue you could think of. And then as I grew more, I started shifting towards prophet evangelist. So I first started evangelist prophet because I had a prophetic kind of unction that wasn't fully developed. I prophesied once in a while. So I was evangelist prophet, then prophet evangelist. And then in 1992, I believe it was, I stepped into the apostolic, and that kind of changed my trajectory.
Yeah.
But I still always had a strong prophetic motivational gift, but it was now, how would I put it, overlaid with a apostolic perspective and motivation that took primary in terms of my focus. It became my primary focus as opposed to prophetic blessing.
Yeah.
So I became more of a builder in my prophetic ministry, my teaching, my preaching, everything, once I matured enough.
Yeah, so you probably have all sorts of wild experiences you've seen traveling and doing prophetic ministry and observing and being a pastor for so long, observing other people doing prophetic ministry. Do you feel like things changed? I mean, how many years of ministry has this been? Like 30 plus years of ministry. So do you feel like things have changed in the prophetic environment since you started out and just what you've been a part of?
Well, I never got involved in the prophetic circles,
Mm-hmm.
so I was exposed to it once or twice in the 1980s,
Mm-hmm.
and it was like wildfire. It was like
Mm-hmm.
the Wild Wild West, and it kind of turned off a lot of pastors, and they shut down the gift. So there's nothing new under the sun when
Yeah.
you first start discovering a gift.
Yeah.
And in the 1980s, you have people starting to teach the School of the Prophets in New York City and other places, and everybody started prophesying, and the next thing you know, there was not enough in terms of understanding of how to operate in the gift. So in the 1980s, we saw a lot of crazy things, but
Mm-hmm.
our church was uh, protected from that because I never allowed that kind of stuff to go on.
Mm.
So we never really saw that. In the places I ministered, I didn't see much of that because we ministered in places that were collectives connected to us,
Mm-hmm.
and there was a lot of stability. So thank God we were spared some of the wild excess. But now nobody is going to be spared totally because of the rise of social media prophets.
Right.
And that's what I also have in this book in one chapter. We talk about this. And with the rise of social media prophets, anybody could drop a word to hundreds of thousands of followers.
Yeah.
We don't know if they've been properly vetted. Do they belong to a local church? Do they have spiritual accountability in their life?
Yeah.
Do they have, a healthy walk with God? Are they, faithful to their spouse
Right.
with their finances? I mean, we know nothing. We just know that they could get a big following.
Yeah.
So it's a very dangerous development. It could also be a blessing to give unknown voices a chance to share their gift.
Yeah.
So not everybody who's prophesying is off or causing problems on social media. But unfortunately, it comes with the good and the bad.
Yeah.
And not having a proper system of vetting is a problem, in my opinion.
Yeah. Well, it's probably a really big picture question, but when we don't have a very high view of the church, it seems like, or the importance of the church as kind of Western. I mean, I think you could look at it in the evangelical world in general, definitely in the charismatic Pentecostal world. There's a low ecclesiology or a low view of the church where it almost seems like, I don't know, I hear a lot of Christians talk almost like the kingdom is more important than the church. And so, which, I mean, it'd take a long time to probably get down to the minutia and the details on that, because the kingdom's eternal, wherever God reigns, and it is bigger than the church in the one sense. But it's almost like I've come across a lot of Christians that almost think that like the church is like the baby step to the good, or the first initial step to the good stuff, and then you get into the kingdom eventually, and then you don't really need the church because you're out there like establishing government and doing business and making money and like creating media and these big platforms, and it's like we got to be more kingdom minded, which I fully embrace the kingdom message. I mean, you've written at least 3 of your books are on the kingdom, maybe more. So you're obviously a big kingdom guy, and I am too. But I think that somehow Christians, it got blurry for a lot of Western Christians, and they pursue the kingdom things, they've lost the importance of the church. And I think that's what you're writing about with social media prophets. We need people that are connected to local churches. There's nothing wrong with utilizing social media, but are people rooted and planted in places that know them, can keep them accountable? I'd love for you to speak into that a little bit.
Yeah, well, the thing that separates this book from most other books,
Mm-hmm.
or maybe all other books on the prophetic, I'm not sure I've read every book out there,
Right.
is that it has a strong ecclesiology underpinning it.
Mm-hmm.
That is to say, it's very local church centric,
Mm-hmm.
because that's what the Bible is.
Right.
And the Bible gives prophetic guidelines in the context of it being to edify the church. It was
Right.
never just given for personal prophecy or for people to find their gift or to feel important or to walk in their purpose. That's just a Western mindset. It was to edify the church. Hence, it should always be done in the context of the local church or sanctioned by the local church.
Yeah.
So when we don't have a strong ecclesiology or, as you said, a high view of the church, we have all these prophetic voices that can be very misleading. And if you get a word and you have nobody to shepherd that word in your life, you can misinterpret the word.
Yep.
You can even hear parts of it and not hear other parts. So even to protect the prophet, there should be some kind of checks and balances. Maybe elders or people who are mature in the church should judge words.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm not into all this free-for-all where you have these prophetic conferences online or even in person where anybody could come and get a prophetic word. Well, who's their shepherd? Who's going
Right.
to walk out the word with them? Who's
Yep.
going to help interpret the word? You know, it's easy to fill a room by saying everyone's going to get a personal prophecy.
Yeah.
But it's a disingenuous attempt of building a crowd because you cannot edify the church unless there is a structure and a proper alignment that would be connected to the people receiving the word so that
Yeah.
they can grow in the grace and knowledge of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
So if I get a word, especially if I'm getting a word related to some kind of direction in my life or something that could be life-altering, I should immediately have it judged by a spiritual leader. Even me as a senior pastor,
Yeah.
I would want to get the word judged by other leaders
Yep.
I respect. So these conferences that have open policy, open door policy, anyone can get a prophetic word. When we don't even know what church they're a part of, or maybe they're not even in a church,
Yeah.
how are we going to help them shepherd the word?
Right. That's really good.
You know, so it's important.
So when you receive a word, and like you're saying, not just as like only, I mean, and probably even more, well, important for everybody, but even more critical for like a new Christian or somebody that's coming brand new into embracing the prophetic or into a prophetic environment. So they're not used to getting a prophecy, you know, and then all the way up to people like you that have been in the church for years. You're still getting input. Like you said, you're still asking for maybe other elders in your church, other leaders that you respect that speak into your life, for feedback on a word like that. So is there some guidelines that you use when you receive a word before you even like step out on it? Like, you know, like, cause some people are like, well, Joe, I see you traveling and you got to get a prophetic word. Like you're going to go into a new season. You're going to do this. Well, if somebody was immature, they could like quit their job, move to a new city. You know, we're moving, we're doing this. Our whole life's changing tomorrow because we got this one person that told us this. And it's almost like they let it be the only thing that directs them. And we try to teach people that it should be a part. It could be a part of what directs your life decisions, but it's only like one little sliver. You have to weigh it. You have to have confirmations checks. So is there a few like go-to guidelines that you use before you even act out on a word that you're given like that?
Yeah, well, that's the whole point of why we need the local church. Because the Bible says when we prophesy, 1 Corinthians 13:9, we know in part and prophesy
That's
in
right.
part. And so you're only getting fragments of God's will, if it is accurate,
Yeah.
from a prophetic word that comes from somebody, whether it's a prophet or just someone moving in the simple gift of prophecy. And that's where the collective of the church comes in. You have counsel from elders. You have other people getting a sense of the timing. Other people who may sense that the word is not accurate. You know, I've seen very accurate prophetic people come into our church and miss it totally with people, and I've had to correct it. So just because someone has a good track record doesn't mean they're always going to be accurate.
Right.
So that's where the protection of the church comes in. So yeah, I've seen people that weren't even living right get prophecies that God has called them to be an apostle to the nations or something like that. And if God was really speaking to them, he'd first deal with their own lack of integrity and getting their life in order and trying to instead of puffing their brain up with this elaborate prophecy,
Yeah.
he would deal with the root of the issue. I can't see Jesus telling somebody that if they were not even walking in a way that pleased God. So
Right.
he would try to get them right with God first. So, but that's where the pastors come in and protect people or other spiritual leaders in the church.
Right.
So it's important that we have the local church as a protection.
Yeah. How do you nurture young people that want to grow in the prophetic gift, and you don't want them to be like so fear-based that they just walk away? Like you're saying, we don't want people to disengage or like pull away from the prophetic. So how do you encourage nurturing that gift while keeping, guardrails and boundaries?
Well, I could speak my own experience. I developed in the prophetic by being in a small group. We called them cell groups in the 1980s and late 70s and 80s. And I learned how to prophesy by being in a safe place of 20 or 30 disciples. And some of them prophesied. I learned how to prophesy through their gift. And if I made a mistake, I could be gently corrected.
Yeah.
And if you don't learn in a small gathering first, then how are you going to do it to a larger group, So I think that the first thing would be to be in a small group, be in a place where you're being discipled and mentored by at least one person,
Yeah.
and checking your gift out. And if it's truly of God, other people will recognize it,
Right.
and it'll bear fruit. If it's not of God, it doesn't matter how many prophecies you got saying you're called to do this or that. Other people in the church will not respond and will not recognize it.
Wow. No, that's really good. I think, small groups, cell groups, those kind of things are just so powerful to help people grow and mature, because you get to know each other, and you, like you said, you could learn from people that are more experienced. They could gently correct you, and then you could, it just one thing leads to another, right? Faithful with something small, you get trusted with more. Oh, that's great. Now I kind of want to ask you because I've got a lot of books on my bucket list too, and I really love writing. Poetry, writing nonfiction. I have some fiction ideas that I've sketched out a little bit. I love writing, but you're kind of a hero status in my view, because you pump out so much material. Like, you release at least one blog a week, maybe two, and then you're writing books constantly, like one after another's coming out. So what is some of do you have a trick for that? Do you have like a daily routine, weekly routine? I like getting it inside the mind of leaders, like into some of their habits that might seem boring, but I feel like we can kind of glean life hacks sometimes from somebody else that is like, why didn't I think of doing that in my schedule, or so anyway, how do you write so much? How do you get it all done?
Well, I have my cell phone with me everywhere I go, and I have a whole section in the cell phone called Pending to Write. And if I get an idea of a topic, I write it down right away. And then sometimes I'll write out all the points of the topic. And then usually by Saturday or Monday, I'll write out the blog, so it could be released on Tuesday. So Monday I try to block out time to write if I have time to do that. Or if I have extra time on Friday. Friday I do a lot of personal things, but if I don't have as much personal things, I may just write the article out on Friday. In terms of books, I just constantly put down ideas for certain subjects. Even old articles are the seedbed of future books, because I could just expand on all of the articles and make them a book. Like one of the books I came out with, the Jesus Principles, was based on an article I wrote, How Jesus Released Human Potential. And I just took each point of that article and I made it a chapter.
Okay.
So everything builds on the next thing.
Right.
And so that's how I do it. I also have books I've written that I haven't published yet. I have one that's over 300 pages, and I wrote it in 1999, and I still haven't published it yet. I'm just waiting for the right time.
Yeah.
So when I get inspired, there's no real set pattern. It's when I feel inspired, I believe that's God telling me do it now. And
Gotcha.
I kind of block out the time and write as much as I can.
Okay.
Because sometimes I just am so busy I don't have time to write.
Gotcha. So it's not, you feel it comes more through inspiration. It's not so much like you schedule a writing time and then you just plow through it and do it.
No.
Okay.
I've only gone away twice
Mm-hmm.
in, since 1998 when I started writing books. I've only gone away twice to write a book.
Yeah.
One of them I still didn't release yet, and the other one I went away for a few days, and that's it. But I usually write books in the midst of my busy schedule, sometimes in the kitchen with screaming kids.
Uh-huh.
I could write even when there's a lot of loud noises and
Gotcha.
interruptions. I live in New York City, so that's how I've been able to maintain a writing repertoire
Yeah.
while not having the luxury of taking time off. I always felt guilty leaving my wife alone in the house with all the responsibilities. So always tried to write while I was doing life with my wife and kids and church.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Not everyone could do that. I understand
Right.
that. Yeah.
Right. But you're able to lock in. Yeah. But you're used to the city life, maybe, huh?
Yeah.
Brooklyn. So with all the writing you've done, all your articles, this book, probably other books, you probably experienced a lot of criticism too. So has that always been easy for you? I mean, I know you read a lot and you're used to like probably a lot of the areas that you've studied and read, there's always like diverse opinions and there's debate and there's people going back and forth on each other's material. So, but was it hard for you to deal with criticism earlier on? Is it still hard, or is it something that you've just been able to manage pretty easily when people don't agree with your work or maybe write things against you? Or
Well, the nature of the comments, usually all you got to do is look at whether secular articles or TED Talk comments or a Christian magazine like the Christian Post or Charisma.
Yeah.
When you see the comments, there's people that are extremely immature, dogmatic, critical of everything. There's always something to criticize, so it doesn't bother me at all.
Yeah.
I'll try to learn from it. I remember one or two times I actually read a comment and I agreed with it and I grew from it.
Yeah.
And I got in touch with the person criticizing me and we started a friendship.
Yeah.
I welcome it because I want to grow, but I don't get discouraged or most of the time I quite frankly ignore it because the things they're saying show they didn't really read the article or they didn't read the book. They're criticizing things that were already explained in the book as if I didn't explain it.
Yeah.
So people read with an agenda. Maybe they may be a cessationist and they'll criticize anything having to do with the charismatic church, or maybe they hate the apostolic and they think everything's the NAR.
Yeah.
And so they'll pick on that.
That'd be a whole other interesting podcast. What is the
So,
NAR? Because nobody really knows.
Yeah, I wish I knew
It's
what
like
the
a
NAR
flying spaghetti
was.
monster, like
Yeah.
a UFO that.
Yeah, but it's, you could tell by looking at comments the lens of life that people are looking at.
Yeah.
I remember when we wrote the prophetic standard statement,
Yeah.
and one girl I knew for a long time, she was a rabid Trump fan
Yeah.
and obviously didn't read the whole statement and thought it was a deception and a demonic attack against the prophets.
Oh, wow.
And I said, well, how is this statement an attack against the prophets? It actually encourages prophecy.
Right.
So obviously this person was so blinded by their political proclivities and their hope that Donald Trump would be reelected that anything that could bring even a guideline to the prophetic was a threat to her.
Yeah.
So that kind of thing doesn't, I actually laugh when I see that. I feel sorry for the person, but I don't get troubled by what people say. I love constructive criticism because that's one way to learn and grow.
Right.
But I don't mind people who are foolish who comment. And quite frankly, if someone says something out of line on Facebook, I block them.
Yeah.
I have no problem, even if it's a friend of mine.
Yeah.
If they say they go over a certain line,
Uh-huh.
they're off.
Yeah.
That's my page.
Yeah.
I do what I want with it. If you're
Right.
not going to respect the boundaries,
Yep.
you're off.
No, that's a good principle.
Yeah.
Well, do you have any stories or points to expand on how you've seen the prophetic just release such great power? I mean, you talked about how it's one of the greatest gifts, and it's something you definitely want to encourage, as well as give boundaries. Which I don't know why. Like you just mentioned, this person, like why people have become so either or on this. You know, like either you embrace every prophecy, no matter how out there it is, and even if it doesn't come true or not, you know, and it's like, well, and then or you just stifle it all together. Do you have any examples from your ministry or of just how you've really seen the prophetic be a real blessing and change lives?
Yeah. Well, all I could say is since 1980, I've kept a prophetic journal. I have probably over 1,000 prophetic words that I've written out or recorded, plus, in addition to that, audio recordings, video recordings. And I often go over them. I have another file on my phone. I read them to encourage myself, to make sure that I'm in tune with what some of the prophetic people have sensed about me that bore witness in my spirit.
Yeah.
I take the prophetic very seriously.
Yeah.
And I've received many, many accurate prophetic words.
Wow.
The book is replete with dozens of stories, so it will really encourage the prophetic. As a matter of fact, even in the introduction, even before you start reading the book, I tell some compelling stories of the power of the prophetic. So, yeah, I think, it would be hard for me to remember one particular
Right.
instance because there's been so many. I know recently I've got a prophetic word from somebody, he didn't even speak English, and he knew the names of 2 of my children.
Wow.
And told me my whole trajectory,
Huh.
and even mentioned that I was supposed to write books for leaders.
Huh.
And he didn't even know my first name.
Wow.
It wasn't like he could Google me.
Uh-huh.
And he just knew me as Bishop.
Huh.
And that profoundly affected me.
Yeah.
And I could still listen to it to this day and get encouragement in the midst of trials.
Right.
So, but yeah, many, many instances, even when I was praying about starting Christ Covenant Coalition in 1999, I had 2 words given to me independent of each other, 2 weeks apart, saying I was called to start a network. I took 3 days off in January, so those other words were given to me in November. And I took 3 days to carve out to fast and pray. And literally on the first day after just like 3 to 5 hours of prayer, I received 3 different phone calls from people. One was an intercessor from Texas, another one was an intercessor from Maryland, and one was my best friend from Ohio saying, God just told me you're starting a network. How come you didn't tell me about it?
Huh.
And all 3 words
Wow.
were confirming that I was supposed to start it.
Yeah.
And I stopped fasting and praying. I didn't go the whole 3 days. It didn't make any sense. I knew I was supposed to do it. So that's one profound example, but there's so many like that.
Yeah. That's incredible.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for your time today and sharing your book. I think it's going to be very, very helpful for churches, for pastors, and for people in our churches. And I hope that we expand the kingdom and we see more kingdom activity than ever, but that we do it through strong churches, and that the prophetic ministry is a big part of how we expand our influence in our cities and in evangelism and how we edify the church. But that hopefully it helps us accomplish our greater mission together as the body of Christ. And if people want to get more of your materials or read your blogs, what's the best spot to go get all that stuff?
They go to my website, josephmattera.org. That's Joseph, Joseph, and last name is Mattera.org, josephmattera.org. And there's 13 books, a training institute for apostolic leadership, and almost 2,000 articles and other materials that
Yeah.
they could avail themselves of.
Wow. So, and then you're also active on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, so they can find you on social media as well and get a lot of updates from you. And
Yeah,
yeah,
definitely.
great. Well, thank you. It's been a real blessing. I'm sure everybody enjoyed it. So thanks for tuning in, and can't wait till next time.
Amen. Well, thank you
Yeah.
so much for having me. Great job, John.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining the John Hammer Show. Please give us a thumbs up, like, and subscribe if you're enjoying the content here. And the best way to support this podcast is leaving us a great review. Thanks.